Good afternoon. I'm Keval Datani.
I'm Abdi Boué.
I'm Natasha Eager-Jones.
And I'm Amy Preston.
And welcome to Warwick Congress Weekly. We're going to jump straight into things this week. We've got news on the Iran nuclear deal, UK local elections, Cambridge Analytica, Putin's inauguration, and much, much more. As always, we're going to tell you a little bit about Warwick Congress, who we are, what we do, and how we do it.
Warwick Congress is one of the fastest growing student-run initiatives in the UK that aims to unite the disciplines of finance, economics, politics and law into a single platform. To stay up to date with everything we do, sign up for free membership on our website at www.warwickcongress.com.
Our hope is that Warwick Congress can inform our listeners, and if you have any questions, queries or opinions, please let us know. You can message in to our show by going to space.radio.warwick.ac.uk and pressing the message tab in the top right hand corner, but if you're listening you probably know that anyway. So without further ado, our first story of the week is breaking as of yesterday, and it is to do with the US withdrawing from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the Iran nuclear deal.
Yeah, cool. So President Trump announced that he was withdrawing from the US from the Iran nuclear deal, and it's a huge setback here for relations between the West and the Islamic Republic. Mr. Trump said that it is clear to me that we cannot prevent an Iranian nuclear bomb under the decaying and rotten structure of the current agreement. He also said that the Iran deal is defective at its core, and if they do nothing, we know exactly what will happen. It's pretty clear here that Trump is worried about Iran's past intentions to pursue a nuclear weapon, with Israeli intelligence recently documenting that Iran had at times shown plans to build a nuclear weapon. And although Trump is making the case here for withdrawing upon this information, it is anything new, and the US and others knew of it when signing the agreement in the first place. Critically, the documents didn't reveal anything about Iran's current nuclear program, which is said to be complying with the deal, as was mentioned previously on the show beforehand, in previous weeks. Trump's speech then was full of valid points somewhat, but it was still hampered with misunderstandings of the deal's provisions, and that causes problems in the long run. Trump said that he would initiate new sanctions in the regime, crippling the touchstone agreement negotiated by his predecessor. Trump said any country that helps Iran obtain nuclear weapons would also be strongly sanctioned. The decision to reimpose sanctions raises fears that the European companies who trade with the Iranian government and do business in America could be hit. Previously, the sanctions imposed by the US, UK and the EU in the attempt to halt the flow of uranium enrichment did cripple Iran's economy and cost more than £110 billion in oil revenue from 2012 to 2016. The sanctions do not come into effect immediately, and they do allow for a sort of wind down time of around 180 days where the US could again negotiate another nuclear deal, and it sort of allows US companies there to finish their business operations in the region.
So I guess then the next key question is, what's the reaction been from around the world?
Yeah, sure. So world leaders' reaction to the deal was swift, but with also varied responses. So while the UK, France and Germany condemned the decision, you saw Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and also the EU, along with Israel, applaud the decision made by Trump. The UK, France and Germany issued a joint statement, and it said that they regret the decision made, and made it clear that they would remain in the agreement. Doubts still remain, though, of how the agreement will look now after the US has withdrawn from the deal. Emmanuel Macron, who's been quite vocal about the need to stay in the deal, pointing to there's no plan B, said that we will work collectively on a broader framework covering nuclear activity, the post-2025 period, ballistic activity, stability in the Middle East, notably Syria, Yemen and Iraq. The EU has also come out in defence of reports sort of certifying Iran's compliance with the deal, and they sort of reiterated their commitment to what they said was a full and effective implementation of the deal. In contrast, then, you have someone like Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who sort of expressed his delight at the decision, citing Israeli full support of Trump's bold decision today to reject the disastrous nuclear deal with the terrorist regime in Iran. Shortly before Mr. Trump's speech, though, Israel's military said that they had detected irregular activity of the sort of Iranian forces in Syria and ordered Israelis on the Golan Heights to ready their bomb shelters. So it's clear that tensions between Israel and Iran don't appear to be cooling down, and the withdrawal then of the agreement from the US hasn't helped matters in this regard at all. The country's foreign minister of Iran, Javad Zarif, said he would work with the pact's remaining partners, which include France, the UK, Germany, China and Russia, to see whether they could sort of ensure the full agreements, the full benefits of the agreement remain for Iran. However, if negotiations with other partners fail, then President Hassan Rouhani did make clear that he has no qualms with starting the country's uranium enrichment program again.
So where is all this going then?
Well, the US aim is to create a grand coalition, and its aim is to halt Iran's nuclear ambitions while addressing US concerns about Iran using the leverage of economic isolation. Andrew Keller, who's sort of a former deputy assistant of Secretary of State for Sanctions and counter-threat finance, said that it's very difficult to see how we get a better deal given that Iran will have no reason to go back to the negotiating table and no reason to trust us. The fear then is that once Iran starts to produce uranium again and the ban the International Atomic Agency from inspecting its program, Saudi Arabia could then start developing nuclear weapons, also alongside Israeli launching unilateral airstrikes against Iran. So therefore the likelihood of a war breaking out in the Middle East isn't slim, let's say. And then there's also broad anger coming from Iran, in particular their government, which in the recent incident, after the decision was announced, saw a US flag being burnt, which suggests that while Trump may have perceived the move to undermine Iran, it may only serve to strengthen the hardliner rhetoric coming out of the country. It also further isolates Trump on the global stage, where he's angered even the staunchest of US allies by going back on US commitments to a Paris Climate Accord and also pulling out of the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement.
So quite a significant news story coming out of there. And towards the end of his speech, when he was signing the bill, was it a bill or is it an executive agreement? I don't really know. Whatever he signed with his massive signature. There was a journalist that was asking loads of questions, and one of the questions she was saying was, how does this affect North Korea? And I guess the US being able to stick to its treaties is obviously something that's huge, and whether they can be trusted. And Trump did point to that, and I think direct quote is, "We will see how things will pan out with North Korea." So the ramifications of this quite significant. Looking a bit closer to home, last week we had local elections in the UK, which I believe Amy has an update for us.
Yeah, so I'll first give you a roundup of the election results in the 2018 local elections in the UK. So with all councils declared, Labour won 2,350 seats, and that was up 77. The Conservatives won 1,332 seats, and this was down 33. The Lib Dems won 536, up 75. The Greens won 39, up 8, and UKIP won 3, and that was down 123 seats. So this year saw the best result for Labour since 1971, so quite a big achievement there. And the elections also saw a historic moment for the Green Party, who won their first seat on Britain's biggest local authority. UKIP, on the other hand, who performed strongly in 2014, were almost wiped out in this year's elections, with only 3 councillors standing.
So have we seen any major changes, I guess, in any certain regions?
Well, the BBC political editor Laura Koonsberg has said that nothing really that dramatic has happened this year. The Conservatives gained the London Council of Barnet from no overall control and held their flagship London councils of Westminster and Wandsworth. But they have lost control of their northern flagship, Trafford Council, after 14 years of Conservative rule. Labour, on the other hand, won Plymouth from the Tories and gained Kirklees from no overall control, but lost Nuneaton and Bedworth and Derby.
So what should we actually make from these election results then?
Well, analysis has suggested that Labour and the Conservatives were neck and neck overall in terms of the national vote share, about 35% each. Last year, Labour's vote share was estimated to be narrowly ahead of the Tories. BBC political correspondent Chris Mason has said that neither Labour nor the Tories could actually claim a substantial breakthrough. So it seems that analysts are saying that no one really has won this election. Turning to the Labour leader, Jeremy Corbyn, he said he was actually disappointed at any places where we lost a bit of ground. However, he insisted it was a solid set of results, and this has left the Labour Party well placed to fight and win the next general election. It's possible the Conservatives have benefited from the collapse of the UKIP vote as well, prompting leading Brexiteers such as Boris Johnson and Ian Duncan Smith to urge the Prime Minister to press on with plans for a clean break with the EU.
So that's a massive loss for UKIP. So I guess what's next for UKIP?
Yes, indeed. Well, UKIP's been suffering since the Brexit vote in 2016. In response to the local election results, though, General Secretary Paul Oakley has said it was not all over at all for the party. He's actually compared the UKIP party to the Black Death in the Middle Ages, saying it comes along and it causes disruption and then it goes dormant. And that's exactly what we're going to do. UKIP leader Gerard Batten added, "I think things will change as we go forward, and people will realise they're not going to get the Brexit vote they voted for in 2016, when I think our support will build again."
So then the other party that's, I guess, done quite well is the Green Party. So what can we make of the results for them?
Yeah, in light of their results, the Greens have said that they've been established as England's fourth party. Leader Caroline Lucas hailed results in target areas like Richmond upon Thames, where they gained 4 seats, although it was won by the Lib Dems ultimately. But she acknowledged her party has been hurt by voters moving to Jeremy Corbyn's Labour, saying that that this was extraordinary and it had done so well to hold our own, and we've made some significant gains. But Ms Lucas said that she was incredibly disappointed to lose all 5 seats the Greens were defending in Norwich. And for this, she's blamed that there's a bit of a Corbyn surge amongst younger voters.
So demographic patterns in the UK maybe appear to be changing, but as I guess UKIP have pointed out, Brexit could play a big factor in that. And something else that has arguably played a big factor in Brexit is Cambridge Analytica.
Yes, indeed. So in light of the recent scandal from Cambridge Analytica, which Warwick Congress has spoken about, and it's up on their website, they've been ordered to turn over information it has on US citizen David Carroll by the UK's data protection watchdog. So for a little background information here, Cambridge Analytica is the firm allegedly behind the use of personal data from millions of Facebook users in an attempt to target voters with bespoke, personalised political advertisements. The data demand stems from legal action by Professor Carroll, David Carroll, who wants to know what information the firm holds on him. He said that it was the fact that it was a British company that had processed US voters' data in the UK in an act of what he says was digital colonialism that had originally inspired him to ask the company for his data back. Mr. Carroll, an associate professor at Parsons School of Design in New York, placed a request on January 10, 2017, way before the controversy arose that sort of implicated the firm in the manipulative tactics surrounding the US presidential election. But as a US citizen, he had no means of obtaining this information under US law. But in January 2016, he discovered that Cambridge Analytica had processed US voter data in the UK, and that this gave him rights under British law. The SCL Group, which is the parent company of Cambridge Analytica, sort of handed over some data on March 27th of 2017. However, Mr. Carroll believed that there was more that the company was holding back. So this sort of led them on to an enforcement notice sent to SCO elections, explaining that, as well as believing Cambridge Analytica had held back information, there was not, in their words, an adequate explanation of where the data had been obtained from or how it would be used. So Cambridge Analytica then sort of attempted to deny the regulated jurisdiction, whilst also disapproving of the request for more detail to be handed over. However, the Information Commissioner Elizabeth Dunham warned that failure to comply with the order is, in her words, a criminal offence punishable in the courts by an unlimited fine. Elizabeth Dunham also added that the company's decision to close down and re-emerge under another name won't give it an out. She said, "We are aware of recent media reports concerning Cambridge Analytica's future, but whether or not the people behind the company decide to fold the operation, a continual refusal to engage with the ICO will potentially breach an enforcement notice, and that then becomes a criminal matter."
So what does this mean for Cambridge Analytica and data privacy going forward then?
Well, reports emerged last week of the company being rebranded as Emma Data. The company, which was created in sort of August 2017, has several top SEL executives sitting on its board, which includes Rebecca and Jennifer Mercer, the daughters of billionaire Conservative donor Robert Mercer. However, the founder of Cambridge Analytica's parent company, SEL Group, said the controversial data analytics firm will not be revived under a new name. And in an interview given on Tuesday to Bloomberg by Nigel Oakes, who sort of founded the SEL Group, he said that Emma Data was in administration, meaning that it was sort of being managed by a court appointed administrator under UK insolvency or bankruptcy proceedings. David Carroll said the decision was a landmark moment. not just for him, but for millions of other people whose data Cambridge Analytica used in the Trump 2016 presidential election and sort of other campaigns. And he said this should solve a lot of mysteries about what the company did with its data and where it got it from. He added there's a lot of questions that no one has been able to answer until now, so hopefully this will be a sort of major breakthrough in our understanding of what it did. Also, the company has claimed to have up to 7,000 data points on 240 million Americans. And if it refuses to reply with Carroll's request or sort of showing that it had misused data, it could open itself up to class action from the entire US electorate. Overall, then, it appears that this may be a sign of things to come in regards to people's data and the privacy issues surrounding the use of it.
Thank you, Beryl. There we go. Thank you very much, Abdi, for that update. Now we shift our focus towards Russia and Mr. Vladimir Putin.
Indeed. So Vladimir Putin was sworn in for a fourth term as Russian president on Saturday, being re-elected with more than 76% of the vote. And Putin now has another 6 years to, as he stated, multiply the strength and prosperity of Russia. However, his inauguration wasn't met with celebration from everyone, as riot police confronted protesters against his rule in Moscow and other Russian cities, with more than 1,000 arrests having been made in 19 cities, so a lot of widespread anger here. And some protesters were actually physically beaten by the police, with Amnesty International.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Evans, and you're listening to Raw 12:51
outrageous. Calling such behaviour outrageous, as that interruption just was, with the European Union similarly stating that the use of violence to sort of undermine the protests threatened fundamental freedom of speech.
So what do you think the fundamental reason is behind the protests?
Well, Putin's been in power for 18 years now, as either president or prime minister, and many kind of liken his tenure to the reign of an emperor, with the biggest complaint amongst Russians being, as surveyed in a poll, that within his time in power, he's actually failed to reduce the wealth gap in Russia, with many Russians also highlighting his failure to refund Russians who lost significant savings during market reforms. And compared with a similar poll in 2015, there's been a doubling of complaints about Putin's kind of tenure. And also, whilst this election has been his best ever election performance, widespread irregularities were reported by some international observers, with there being widespread allegations of ballot rigging. So there's a lot of kind of controversy as to how legitimate this election really was, especially due to the fact that the country's best-known opposition leader, Alexei Navalny, was barred from standing against Putin on grounds of a conviction for embezzlement, which he denies and alleges was politically motivated. So yeah, there's currently a lot of controversy as to how legitimate this election really was, with a lot of Russians kind of remaining unconvinced as to whether another 6 years of Putin's really going to sort of fix the country.
So now we're moving on to news of the American embassy that is going to move to Jerusalem. And that is scheduled to open on the 14th of May, but it's just a symbolic move that will happen next week. The embassy still needs to be built and everything needs to be transferred from the current embassy, which is in Tel Aviv, which could take years. So next week, only a limited number of offices will be moved from the embassy in Tel Aviv to the new Jerusalem location. And these offices will include the office of US Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, who will begin working from Jerusalem on a regular basis. However, many other functions of the US embassy will remain in Tel Aviv at the building housing the current embassy on Hayarken Street in Tel Aviv. For the Israeli government, even this preliminary move is considered to be a major diplomatic achievement, as Israel has long maintained that Jerusalem is the capital of the state, not Tel Aviv, but most states, particularly OECD states, have their embassies in Tel Aviv instead. The temporary location for the offices will be in the US consulate offices in Jerusalem. And Israeli President Rivlin and Prime Minister Netanyahu, as well as US Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, are expected to attend the opening ceremony that's happening next week.
So obviously the status of Jerusalem is a very contentious issue for Israelis and Palestinians. So what's been the reaction from the Palestinian side to this?
Yeah, so the Palestinian Authority has strongly denounced the Trump administration's decision on Jerusalem, as you'd expect. And this decision was actually made last December. And the Palestinian Authority has refused to engage with the Trump administration ever since that decision. Public opinion polls have shown that the embassy move is unpopular on the Palestinian streets and has led to accusations against the Trump administration that it's biased towards Israel and therefore cannot be trusted as an honest broker in any potential peace talks between the two sides, which is something that President Trump has hinted at. Other Arab nations have also criticised President Trump's move, and the Arab League published a joint statement emphasising that East Jerusalem should become the capital of Palestine. However, most Arab countries didn't express as strong of a criticism of the administration as the Palestinians, and none of those countries cut their ties with the administration. Jordan, which is considered the custodian of the holy Islamic sites in Jerusalem, denounced the move, but later said that it still believes that the United States should have a leading role in peace talks between Israel and the Palestinians. And since President Trump announced this move in December, Guatemala, Honduras, and Paraguay have all announced that they will move their embassies to Jerusalem in due course, so potentially setting a trend that could dictate the future of the Arab-Israeli conflict. So now, as always, we have Tash's Brexit update.
Oh, I was hoping for a really fun, national anthem introduction.
No, I've got no national anthem, unfortunately. That's probably the best I can do. So, Brexit.
Right, so Boris Johnson has attacked Prime Minister Theresa May's plans for post-Brexit customs rules as crazy, reigniting tensions amongst the cabinet, which could lead to walkouts over the controversy. And Boris claims that May's customs partnership idea, which would see the UK collecting tariffs on behalf of the EU, would prevent the country taking back control as voters were promised. And Boris also stated that such a customs partnership would essentially ensure that if the EU decided to impose punitive tariffs on something that the UK wants to bring in cheaply, then the UK would have no choice but to kind of continue collecting these tariffs for the EU, which could have a very negative impact upon the UK's trading prospects. And Boris's comments come at a time when the inner cabinet was split 6-5 against the customs partnership in a meeting last week, with the pro-EU business secretary Greg Clark arguing that thousands of British jobs depend on frictionless trade with Europe that this sort of partnership could undermine. However, May has signalled that she'll press ahead with her plans, hoping to win the support of some softer Brexiteers in her inner cabinet, as well as telling colleagues that they could be forced by Parliament to accept a full customs union with the EU if they didn't support her compromise plan.
So what can we expect to happen next?
Well, the so-called Brexit War Cabinet, which I think is quite a fun name, is due to meet on Thursday to discuss the potential customs partnership in further detail. Meanwhile, however, the government has suffered its 12th defeat in the House of Lords on the EU withdrawal bill, with peers backing a cross-party amendment to remove the Brexit date of 29th of March 2019 from the legislation. So who even knows if Brexit's going to happen anymore? But yeah, another week, more complications.
Well, that's not very cheerful. I feel like we need another
exam
jingle.
season.
Yeah, it's exam season. Let's lighten the mood a bit. We've got some financial news of the week, but before we do that, I feel like I want my own jingle.
Of course, yours is better.
Yeah, well, I've just found the jingle button. It's amazing. Here we go. On to some financial news of the week, which is our last story for you. Argentina's peso is in rebound mode against the dollar after the Latin American nation opened talks with the IMF over a reported $30 billion financial aid package. On Friday, Argentina's central bank hiked rates for the third time in 8 days to a whopping 40%, the highest overnight interest rate in the world. Bear in mind that Japan at the moment has negative interest rates, so just to provide some perspective there. And that rise was in an attempt to rein in the country's rampant inflation. In 2001, Argentina defaulted on her debts and left millions in poverty after a 4-year, depression. The US has announced new sanctions on 3 Venezuelans and 20 companies with ties to President Maduro, whom it blames for a deep recession and hyperinflation that have caused food shortages across Venezuela. Vice President Mike Pence also called for more nations to increase pressure and urged Caracas to suspend a May 20th election he denounced as a sham. The US Department of Defense has asked the House and Senate Armed Services Committees to include new restrictions on foreign investment in the US in a defense spending bill that's expected to be unveiled this week. The bipartisan legislation would significantly expand the purview of the committees to review transactions involving non-US parties, specifically China, so aim to get greater oversight there and almost tying in with the tariffs that Trump has promised on China. Sarah Sanders told reporters that, and I'm quoting here, China's top economic advisor, the Vice Premier Liu He, will be coming here next week to continue the discussions with the president's economic team. And that news came as the country reported trade figures for April, with China's surplus with the US expanding to $22.2 billion compared with a surplus of $15.4 billion in March. And spurned by its initial pursuit of 21st Century Fox, Comcast is preparing to challenge Disney's $52 billion deal to acquire most of the studio's film and TV assets, according to Reuters. Comcast has asked investment banks to increase bridge financing facility by as much as $60 billion so it can make an all-cash offer, but is waiting for a ruling next month on the AT&T Time Warner merger before making its move. So quite a big shake-up in the US media industry. Amid an internal investigation into inappropriate workplace behaviour at Nike, 5 more executives have departed the company, which takes the total to 11 who have exited the sportswear giant thanks to this probe. And among that group of 5 was the first woman to leave, Helen Kim, who's a VP or was a VP and general manager of Nike East North America. And finally, Boeing had deals in place for about $20 billion in jet sales to Iran, but its license for that will now be revoked, according to Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin, following the US withdrawing from the Iran deal and laying on heavy economic sanctions. But Bloomberg is reporting that United Airlines has held talks with Boeing and Airbus to replace a fleet of 50 Boeing 767s with the A330neo or the 787 Dreamliner. So that's all from us, but before we leave, we've got a quick summary of all the stories that you have heard today.
So, President Trump has announced that he's withdrawing the US from the Iran nuclear deal in a huge setback for relations between the West and the Islamic Republic. The move has been condemned by France, UK and Germany, while Iran's rivals in the region, Saudi Arabia and Israel, have welcomed the decision.
Last Thursday, the UK held its 2018 local elections. Analysts have said there are no clear winners of this election. Labour won 2,350 seats, up 77. The Conservatives won 1,332 and was down 33. But this year saw the best result for Labour since 1971, while the UKIP party were almost wiped out in this election. UK regulator orders Cambridge Analytica to release data on US voter in a landmark cross-border decision, which gives Cambridge Analytica 30 days to comply with David Carroll's request for his data to be released or face criminal prosecution.
Vladimir Putin has been sworn in for another 6 years as president, being re-elected with more than 76% of the vote. His inauguration was met with more than 1,000 protests across Russia in more than 19 cities, with many Russians stating that Putin has failed to reduce the wealth gap and to refund Russians who lost significant savings during market reforms.
Next week, the USA will officially move a limited number of offices from their current embassy in Tel Aviv to its new location in Jerusalem. The move has caused controversy worldwide and has been met with widespread protests around the world, but is set to continue as planned. And finally, Boris Johnson has attacked Theresa May's plan for post-Brexit custom rules, in which the UK will collect tariffs on behalf of the EU, as crazy due to their likely negative impact on UK's trading prospects. His comments come at a time when the government has suffered its 12th defeat in the House of Lords over the EU withdrawal bill. Don't forget, becoming a member of Warwick Congress has never been easier. With exclusive interviews, articles and careers events for our members, don't miss out on the benefits that Warwick Congress membership can provide. Sign up now at www.warwickcongress.com. You've been listening to Warwick Congress Weekly. I won't be back, but someone from the team will be back to give you your weekly news update, so we'll see you at the same time next week.